There are people in this world who will hold your hand, but never fully hold your heart. People who will come close enough to make you feel chosen, but distant enough to make you feel alone. And if you are in love with an avoidant person, you know exactly what that feels like. You know the confusion, the mixed signals, the silence after intimacy, the warmth one day and the coldness the next. You know what it feels like to constantly wonder, did I do something wrong? You know what it feels like to beg for reassurance without using words, to overthink every text, every pause, every emotional withdrawal. But hear this clearly today. Their inability to fully love you is not proof that you are hard to love. Some people grew up believing emotions were dangerous. Some people learned that vulnerability leads to pain. Some people mastered the art of running before they could ever be abandoned. And when love finally arrives in their life, instead of resting in it, they panic inside it. Because closeness terrifies wounded people. An avoidant person may love you deeply and still struggle to stay emotionally present. That is the tragedy. Not every person who loves you knows how to receive love. Not every person who wants connection knows how to sustain connection. And if you are not careful, you will spend years trying to earn what should have been freely given. You will become addicted to tiny moments of affection. A good morning text will feel like oxygen. One vulnerable conversation will keep you emotionally attached for months. You will celebrate the bare minimum because inconsistency trains the heart to survive on crumbs. But love was never meant to starve you. Real love does not keep you constantly anxious. Real love does not punish you for expressing emotions. Real love does not make you feel guilty for needing reassurance, honesty, affection, or clarity. You are not created to chase emotional availability from someone who disappears every time intimacy beckons. Mess real. And this is where many good people lose themselves. They become therapists instead of partners. They become rescuers instead of lovers. They spend all their energy trying to understand someone who refuses to understand themselves. Listen carefully. You cannot heal someone by abandoning yourself. Read that again in your spirit. You cannot pour so much love into another person that they suddenly become emotionally healthy. Love is powerful, but love alone does not transform people. Transformation requires self-awareness, responsibility, healing, accountability, choice. And some people would rather lose you than confront the pain inside themselves. That truth hurts, but it will also set you free. Because too many people are romanticizing emotional unavailability. They call it mystery. They call it independence. They call it giving space. But there is a difference between needing healthy space and emotionally abandoning the person who loves you, a person who truly values. You will not leave you emotionally starving while expecting you to remain loyal. They will not constantly make you question your place in their life. They will not disappear every time things become serious. Healthy love communicates. Healthy love reassures. Healthy love stays present during difficult conversations. And yes, nobody is perfect. Everybody has wounds. Everybody has fears. But maturity is not pretending you are fine while hurting people in the process. Maturity is saying, I know I struggle with intimacy. I know I shut down emotionally. I know I pull away when things get serious. I want to heal so I can love better. That is growth. That is accountability. That is emotional courage. But if someone keeps hurting you while making excuses for why they cannot love properly, eventually you must stop calling it patience and start calling it self-betrayal. Because love should not cost you your mental peace. It should not destroy your confidence. It should not make you feel unwanted every single week. And some of you listening right now, you have become emotionally exhausted trying to prove your value to someone who only shows up halfway. You overextend, you overgive, you overexplain, you overstay. Why? Because you keep hoping the version of them you saw in the beginning will finally return permanently. But potential is not commitment, chemistry is not emotional safety, and intensity is not consistency. Never confuse temporary closeness with lasting love. Sometimes avoidant people love the idea of connection more than the responsibility of maintaining connection. And when relationships require depth, vulnerability, sacrifice, and emotional consistency, they retreat, not because you are too much, but because intimacy exposes what they have spent years hiding from. And hear me carefully. You do not have to become emotionally smaller to be loved. Stop shrinking your needs just to keep someone comfortable. Stop pretending you are okay with emotional distance when your soul is craving connection. Stop silencing your pain to avoid pushing them away. If honesty pushes someone away, they were attached to convenience, not connection. The right relationship will not require you to abandon your emotional needs to keep the peace. You deserve someone who chooses you clearly, someone who communicates instead of disappearing, someone who stays emotionally present when life becomes difficult, someone who does not make love feel like a battlefield. And maybe the hardest lesson of all is this: you can deeply love someone and still realize they are not healthy for your spirit. Love is not always enough to sustain a relationship. Compatibility matters, emotional maturity matters, effort matters, consistency matters, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away before your heart forgets its own worth, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect, because your purpose in this life is bigger than chasing people who refuse to meet you emotionally. You were created for peace, for reciprocal love, for emotional safety, for connection that does not constantly wound you. And one day you will understand this truth. The right person will not make you feel difficult for wanting love expressed consistently. They will not fear closeness with you. They will not make you beg for emotional presence. They will not keep you trapped in confusion, because healthy love brings clarity, not chaos. So if you are in love with an avoidant person, hear this with an open heart. You cannot save someone who is committed to running from themselves, but you can save yourself from losing your peace while trying. And sometimes the greatest act of love is finally choosing yourself. One of the hardest truths to accept in relationships is that you cannot force emotional availability from someone who fears intimacy. No matter how patient you are, how understanding you become, or how deeply you love them, you cannot make another person open their heart before they are ready to face the walls they built around it. Many people fall into the trap of believing that if they just love harder, stay longer, sacrifice more, or become perfect enough, the avoidant person will finally feel safe enough to fully commit emotionally. But love does not work that way. Emotional availability is not unlocked through pressure, guilt, or endless reassurance. It comes from inner healing, self-awareness, and the willingness to confront personal fears. Avoidant individuals often struggle with closeness because intimacy feels dangerous to them. Somewhere in their life, they learn that vulnerability leads to pain, disappointment, rejection, or loss of freedom. As a result, they may crave connection while simultaneously resisting it. They may pull you close one moment and push you away the next. This creates confusion for the person trying to love them because the relationship becomes emotionally inconsistent. One day you feel deeply connected, and the next day you feel completely shut out. Over time, this cycle can make you anxious, emotionally drained, and obsessed with trying to fix what keeps breaking between you. But you must understand this clearly. Another person's fear of intimacy is not your responsibility to solve. You are not failing because someone cannot fully receive your love. Some people are fighting battles inside themselves that no relationship can heal for them. Until they choose to confront those fears, every attempt at closeness may trigger withdrawal, avoidance, or emotional distance. And when you keep trying to force emotional connection from someone who resists vulnerability, you begin abandoning your own emotional needs in the process. Healthy love requires mutual openness. It requires both people to participate emotionally, communicate honestly, and remain present even when things become uncomfortable. A relationship cannot survive when one person keeps chasing connection while the other keeps running from it. Eventually, love starts feeling more like emotional survival than emotional peace. You deserve a relationship where affection is not something you constantly have to earn. You deserve clarity instead of confusion, reassurance instead of silence, and consistency instead of emotional unpredictability. Loving someone should never require you to lose yourself while waiting for them to become emotionally available. Many people believe that love has the power to heal everything. They believe that if they stay loyal enough, patient enough, supportive enough, or understanding enough, they can eventually help someone overcome their emotional wounds. But the painful reality is this: loving harder will not heal someone who refuses to face their own pain. You cannot rescue a person who is unwilling to acknowledge the damage inside themselves. No matter how pure your intentions are, healing is a personal decision that cannot be forced by anyone. The person's devotion, when someone avoids accountability for their behavior, avoids emotional growth, or continuously runs from vulnerability, the relationship slowly becomes one-sided. You begin carrying emotional weight that was never yours to carry. You become the one constantly initiating difficult conversations, trying to improve communication, fixing misunderstandings, and holding the relationship together while the other person emotionally checks out whenever things become uncomfortable. Over time, this imbalance becomes exhausting because you are pouring energy into someone who may enjoy your love but still refuses to confront the issues hurting both of you. This is where many people lose themselves. They confuse self-sacrifice with loyalty. They convince themselves that enduring emotional neglect is proof of unconditional love. They keep making excuses for toxic patterns because they see the wounded side of the other person. They say things like, they've been through a lot, or they're just scared of getting hurt. And while compassion is important, compassion should never become permission for repeated emotional harm. Understanding someone's pain does not mean accepting behavior that continuously breaks your spirit. A person cannot build a healthy relationship while refusing to do inner work. Healing requires honesty. It requires self-reflection, emotional responsibility, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Someone who constantly avoids those things will continue repeating destructive patterns no matter how deeply they are loved. Love can support healing, but it cannot replace the effort healing requires. You must also be careful not to turn yourself into someone's emotional savior. Relationships are partnerships, not rehabilitation centers. It is not your job to carry another adult's unresolved trauma while ignoring your own emotional needs. The more you try to heal someone who refuses to heal themselves, the more emotionally depleted you become. Eventually, you may wake up realizing you spent years trying to save someone while slowly losing your own peace, confidence, and emotional stability in the process. Real love grows when both people are willing to heal, communicate, and evolve together. One person cannot carry the emotional responsibility for two hearts forever. One of the most confusing things about loving an avoidant person is realizing that they may genuinely care about you deeply while still struggling to stay emotionally close. This is what makes the experience so painful. If they did not care at all, it would be easier to walk away. But avoidant individuals often show love in inconsistent ways that leave you constantly questioning where you stand. They may give you moments of intense connection, vulnerability, affection, and attention, only to suddenly become distant once the relationship starts feeling emotionally serious. This emotional push and pull creates confusion because their actions seem to continue. Radic their feelings. The truth is, many avoidant people do crave love. They want companionship, connection, intimacy, and understanding just like anyone else. Deep down, many of them fear loneliness. They fear being misunderstood. They fear abandonment. But at the same time, they also fear dependence, emotional exposure, and vulnerability. Love requires openness, and openness can feel terrifying to someone who has spent years protecting themselves emotionally. The closer someone gets to them, the more their internal fears begin to surface. For many avoidant individuals, intimacy can feel like losing control. They may worry that depending on another person will eventually lead to disappointment, rejection, or emotional pain. As a result, when relationships become deeper, they instinctively create distance to regain a sense of safety. This does not always happen consciously. Sometimes they withdraw emotionally without fully understanding why they are doing it themselves. They may be colder, less communicative, distracted, or emotionally unavailable right when the relationship needs closeness the most. This behavior often leaves their partner feeling rejected and emotionally starved. You may start blaming yourself for their withdrawal, wondering if you asked for too much or became too emotional. But their fear of vulnerability was present long before you entered their life. Their emotional walls were built from experiences, beliefs, and wounds they carried before they ever met you. You did not create those walls, and you cannot single-handedly tear them down. Loving an avoidant person requires understanding an important truth. Someone can love you and still lack the emotional tools to maintain a healthy relationship. Feelings alone are not enough. Emotional maturity, communication, consistency, and self-awareness matter too. Without those things, love becomes unstable because fear keeps interrupting connection. This is why you must stop measuring your worth based on someone else's ability to express love consistently. Their struggle with intimacy is not proof that you are unlovable. It is evidence that unresolved fear can interfere with even the deepest feelings. And until someone becomes willing to face those fears honestly, love may continue feeling like a cycle of closeness followed by emotional distance. One of the most dangerous things that can happen in a relationship with an avoidant person is slowly tying your self-worth to their inconsistency. At first, you may not even notice it happening. You simply want reassurance, connection, and emotional closeness. But over time, their unpredictable behavior begins shaping how you see yourself. When they are warm and affectionate, you feel valued. When they become distant or emotionally unavailable, you suddenly feel insecure, anxious, and unimportant. Without realizing it, your confidence starts depending on their attention instead of your own inner stability. This emotional cycle can be addictive. The inconsistency creates emotional highs and lows that keep you constantly seeking validation. You begin chasing small moments of affection because they temporarily calm the fear inside you. A simple text message, a kind word, or one emotionally intimate conversation can feel overwhelmingly meaningful because emotional distance has made basic connection feel rare. You start accepting crumbs because part of you hopes those crumbs will eventually become consistency. But no relationship should condition you to survive on uncertainty. When your self-worth becomes attached to another person's behavior, you lose your emotional center. You begin overanalyzing everything. You question your value based on how quickly they respond, how affectionate they are, or whether they seem emotionally present that day. If they pull away, you blame yourself. If they seem cold, you wonder what you did wrong. You become hyper-aware of every emotional shift because your peace now depends on IR approval and emotional availability. This is emotionally exhausting because another person's inconsistency is not a reliable foundation for self-esteem. Human beings are imperfect, emotional, and complicated. If your identity depends on someone constantly validating you, you will always feel unstable when their behavior changes. That is why self-worth must come from within. It must be rooted in your values, your character, your purpose, and your understanding of your own worth, not in another person's inability to love consistently. You must remember that someone pulling away emotionally does not automatically mean you are lacking something. Their distance is often connected to their own fears, unresolved wounds, or emotional limitations. But when you internalize their inconsistency, you begin shrinking yourself emotionally. You may stop expressing your needs, lower your standards, or tolerate unhealthy behavior just to avoid losing the relationship. Real love should strengthen your sense of worth, not destroy it. A healthy relationship allows you to feel emotionally safe, respected, and valued without constantly proving yourself. You should never have to earn basic emotional consistency by sacrificing your dignity, peace, or emotional well-being. Your value does not increase when someone finally chooses you, and it does not decrease when someone struggles to love you properly. A healthy relationship cannot survive on feelings alone. Attraction, chemistry, and emotional attachment may bring two people together, but lasting love requires much more than emotional intensity. Healthy love is built through communication, safety, effort, and emotional presence from both people. Without these things, relationships become unstable, confusing, and emotionally draining no matter how strong the feelings may be. This is especially important to understand when dealing with avoidant behavior, because many people mistake emotional distance for complexity or emotional inconsistency. Stency for depth. Communication is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity in a relationship. Healthy partners talk through issues instead of disappearing when things become uncomfortable. They express their fears, needs, frustrations, and emotions honestly rather than expecting the other person to read their mind. In emotionally unhealthy dynamics, silence often replaces communication. One person withdraws emotionally while the other becomes increasingly anxious, trying to figure out what went wrong. Over time, this creates emotional insecurity because problems remain unresolved and misunderstandings continue growing. Emotional safety is equally important. A relationship should feel like a place where both people can express themselves without fear of punishment, rejection, or emotional abandonment. You should not feel afraid to communicate your needs or emotions. You should not feel like asking for reassurance makes you too much. In healthy love, vulnerability is welcomed, not avoided. Both people make space for honesty, difficult conversations, and emotional transparency because they understand that trust grows through openness. Effort also matters deeply. Love is not just about what someone feels internally, it is about what they consistently show through their actions. Anyone can say they care, but healthy relationships are sustained by intentional effort. Effort looks like showing up emotionally, maintaining communication, being dependable, listening carefully, and making the relationship a priority even during difficult seasons. A person who only engages when it is convenient or emotionally easy may care about you, but care without consistent effort eventually creates emotional instability. Emotional presence is what allows connection to deepen over time. It means being mentally and emotionally engaged instead of constantly retreating whenever intimacy becomes real. Relationships cannot thrive when one person is always emotionally unavailable or disconnected. Presence creates security because both people know they are facing life together instead of alone. The truth is, love should not constantly leave you confused about where you stand. Healthy relationships bring clarity, stability, and mutual care. Both people take responsibility for maintaining the connection. When communication, safety, effort, and emotional presence are missing, love begins feeling painful instead of peaceful. No matter how strong the emotional bond may seem, relationships require active participation from both hearts in order to truly grow. One of the most difficult lessons in love is realizing that sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing peace over emotional chaos. Many people stay in emotionally unhealthy relationships because they believe walking away means giving up too soon. They convince themselves that enduring confusion, inconsistency, emotional distance, and repeated disappointment is proof of loyalty. But there comes a point where NG no longer reflects love, it reflects fear, emotional attachment, or the inability to let go of what keeps hurting you. Emotional chaos often becomes normalized in relationships with avoidant individuals. The constant cycle of closeness followed by withdrawal creates instability that leaves you emotionally exhausted. One moment you feel deeply connected, hopeful, and reassured, and the next moment you feel ignored, uncertain, and emotionally abandoned. Over time, your nervous system becomes trapped in survival mode, always waiting for the next emotional shift. Instead of experiencing peace, you live in constant anticipation, trying to predict moods, reactions, and periods of distance. This type of emotional instability slowly affects your mental and emotional well-being. You may lose focus, struggle with anxiety, overthink constantly, or begin doubting your own value. Relationships are meant to add strength, support, and emotional safety to your life, not become the source of ongoing emotional confusion. Love should not require you to sacrifice your peace in order to maintain connection. Choosing peace does not mean you never loved the person. In fact, sometimes walking away is harder precisely because the feelings are real. You may still care deeply about them. You may understand their wounds and empathize with their struggles. But understanding someone's pain does not mean you must remain trapped in patterns that continue hurting you. Compassion should never require self-destruction. There is also a powerful difference between fighting for love and fighting to survive emotionally. Healthy relationships involve challenges, but those challenges are approached together. In unhealthy dynamics, one person often carries the emotional burden alone, while the other remains emotionally unavailable or resistant to change. Eventually, you must ask yourself whether the relationship is helping you grow or slowly draining your spirit. Peace is not weakness. Walking away from emotional chaos is not failure. It is self-respect. It is recognizing that your emotional well-being matters too. Sometimes the most loving decision you can make is choosing an environment where your heart no longer has to beg for consistency, clarity, and emotional safety. You deserve relationships that bring calm instead of confusion, reassurance instead of anxiety, and emotional stability instead of constant unpredictability. Love should feel safe enough for your soul to rest, not like a battle you must fight every single day just to feel valued. In the end, loving an avoidant person may teach you one of the greatest lessons of your life. Love should never require you to lose yourself in order to keep someone else. You cannot heal people who refuse to face their wounds, and you cannot build a peaceful future on emotional inconsistency. Real love is not confusion, silence, or emotional distance. Real love is presence, honesty, effort, and mutual healing. So if your heart has been carrying the weight of feeling unwanted, unseen, or emotionally exhausted, let this be your reminder that your value does not decrease because someone struggled to love you correctly. Choose peace. Choose healing. Choose relationships that allow your soul to feel safe, secure, and deeply appreciated. Because the right love will never make you beg for what should flow naturally. Thank you so much for listening. If this message spoke to your heart, carry these words with you and never forget your worth. Keep growing, keep healing, and keep protecting your peace. Your best days, your healthiest love, and your strongest version are still ahead of you. Stay blessed and stay strong.